My name is Seraphina Collins, and I'm 28 years old. Last Thanksgiving changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Standing at my childhood home's front door, holding pumpkin pie and wearing my best dress, my own parents blocked my entrance. "You're not invited," my mother said coldly, while my father avoided eye contact. Behind them, I glimpsed my sister Emma, laughing with relatives, who'd driven hours to be there. That moment of betrayal would lead me down a path of discovery that would destroy our family's carefully constructed lies forever. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama, I need to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're ready for a story that'll have your jaw on the floor, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because trust me, you're going to want to follow this revenge journey to the very end. This Thanksgiving betrayal is just the beginning. The rejection hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen on the porch, still clutching that stupid pie I'd spent 3 hours making from scratch, our grandmother's recipe that Mom always raved about. The autumn wind whipped through my hair as I stared at my parents' faces, searching for some explanation, some sign this was a cruel joke. "I don't understand," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean I'm not invited? It's Thanksgiving. It's our tradition." My mother, Patricia, straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin in that imperious way she'd perfected over the years. She was wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her for her birthday, which somehow made this betrayal sting even more. "Emma told us what you've been doing, Seraphina. We know about your little investigation." The blood drained from my face. Investigation. The word hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. For 3 months, I'd been quietly digging into some financial irregularities I'd noticed in Dad's construction company books. As his accountant, a position Head insisted I take after college, I had access to everything. What I'd found had kept me awake for weeks. "Dad," I turned to him desperately, hoping to find an ally. Robert Collins had always been my champion, the one who'd taught me to ride bikes and change oil and stand up for myself, but now he wouldn't even look at me. His weathered hands, stained permanently with traces of concrete dust, trembled slightly as he gripped the doorframe. "You should have come to us first," he said finally, his voice rough with what might have been regret. "Family handles things internally." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean like how you handled stealing $300,000 from the Peterson job? Or how you handled bribing that safety inspector after Marcus Rodriguez got hurt on site?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I'd been carrying this knowledge like poison in my veins, and now it was spilling everywhere. Dad's face went white, then red, then a dangerous shade of purple I'd never seen before. "Lower your voice," Mom hissed, glancing nervously at the neighbors' houses. "Do you want the whole street to hear you air our dirty laundry?" Our dirty laundry. I was shaking now, from cold and fury and heartbreak all mixed together. I'm not the one who's been cooking the books for 5 years. I'm not the one who's been paying off city officials and cutting corners on safety equipment. That's when Emma appeared behind them, and everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. My younger sister looked different somehow, designer clothes I knew she couldn't afford on her teacher's salary, expensive highlights in her hair, a new car in the driveway that I'd somehow missed in my shock. She was 25 but looked smug in a way that aged her terribly. "Hi, Sarah," she said with fake sweetness. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "You told them." It wasn't a question. The pieces were falling together like dominoes in my mind. "You've known all along." Emma shrugged, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "Dad needed help with the computer systems last year. I've been doing some bookkeeping on weekends. The money's really good." The casual way she said it, like she was talking about a part-time job at Starbucks, made my stomach turn. This wasn't some desperate situation where they'd been forced into illegal activity. This was systematic, calculated fraud, and my entire family had been in on it, while I remained obliviously loyal. "Marcus Rodriguez has 3 kids," I said quietly. "Has been in physical therapy for 8 months because you used substandard scaffolding to save money." "Marcus is getting workers' comp," Dad said defensively. "Hes fine. Hez not fine. I've seen him at the grocery store, Dad. He can barely walk without a cane, and he's 32 years old. The worst part was the way they were all looking at me, like I was the problem. Like I was some naive child who didn't understand how the real world worked. Behind them, through the warm, golden light spilling from the house, I could see our extended family. Aunt Rose arranging flowers on the dining table, Uncle Jim carving turkey, my cousins playing card games on the living room floor. All of them gathered for our traditional Thanksgiving feast, while I stood exiled on the porch like some kind of pariah. "Harris, what's going to happen?" Mom said, her voice taking on that businesslike tone she used when dealing with difficult clients at her real estate office. "You're going to forget whatever you think you know, and you're going to keep working for the company like a good daughter. In return, well, pretend this conversation never happened, and next year you can join us for Thanksgiving again." The audacity of it took my breath away. They were trying to blackmail me with my own family's love. The tradition I'd cherished since childhood, helping Mom with the stuffing, listening to Dad's old stories, watching football with my cousins, was being held hostage to ensure my silence about their crimes. "And if I don't agree to be your accomplice?" I asked. Emma answered before our parents could. "Then you're not family anymore. Simple as that." The casual cruelty in her voice was the final straw. This wasn't the sister who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms or begged me to help her with math homework. This was a stranger who'd been bought and paid for, who valued money over integrity, over family, over everything I thought we'd been raised to believe in. I set the pie down carefully on the porch railing. My hands were remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Keep your blood money," I said. "But understand this. I'm not the one breaking this family apart. You already did that the moment you chose corruption over your own daughter's trust." I turned and walked back to my car, my heels clicking against the concrete walkway I'd helped Dad pour when I was 16. Behind me, I heard the front door close with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. The warm light from the windows felt like mockery now, and I realized I was truly alone for the first time in my life. But as I drove away from my childhood home, something hard and cold was already forming in my chest. They thought they could silence me with exile. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur of streetlights and unshed tears. I kept replaying the scene over and over, looking for some sign. I'd misunderstood, some indication that this nightmare wasn't real. But every detail remained sharp and unforgiving. Mom's pearl necklace catching the porch light, Dad's refusal to meet my eyes, Emma's satisfied smirk. My apartment felt impossibly quiet after the chaos of that confrontation. I'd left that morning, expecting to spend the evening surrounded by family, laughing over Uncle Jim's terrible jokes and helping clear dishes while Mom fussed about everyone eating enough. Instead, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a frozen dinner, staring at the manila folders I'd hidden in my bedroom closet. 3 months of meticulous documentation, bank statements, invoices, safety inspection reports, employee timesheets that didn't match payroll records. I'd started investigating because the numbers hadn't added up, thinking I'd find some innocent bookkeeping errors. What it uncovered instead was a systematic pattern of fraud that went back years. The Peterson job was just the tip of the iceberg. Dad's company had been cutting corners on safety equipment, using substandard materials, and bribing inspectors across multiple projects. The money they'd skimmed had been funneled through a series of shell companies that Emma had helped establish. My baby sister, who used to bring me dandelion bouquets and ask me to check her closet for monsters, had become their digital accomplice. I opened my laptop and began organizing everything I'd gathered. If they wanted to excommunicate me for having a conscience, then I'd make sure that conscience served a purpose. But this time, I wouldn't be the naive daughter who trusted family loyalty above all else. This time, I'd be strategic. First, I researched Marcus Rodriguez. Finding his contact information took some digging, but social media eventually led me to his wife's Facebook page. The photos told a story my family preferred to ignore. Marcus in physical therapy, struggling with basic movements that had once been effortless. Medical bills stacked on their kitchen counter. his oldest daughter's college fund being drained to pay for treatments that workers' compensation barely covered. The Rodriguez family wasn't the only one suffering. A deeper dive into Dad's projects revealed a pattern of injuries, corner cutting, and cover-ups. 3 workers had been hurt in the past 2 years alone, all on jobs where Dad's company had used inferior materials or skipped essential safety protocols. Each time, the incidents had been classified as accidents and quietly settled. But it wasn't just about the money or even the safety violations. It was about the systematic way my family had looked me in the eye for months, while I unknowingly helped perpetuate their crimes. Every invoice E'd processed, every ledger E'd balanced, every financial report E'd prepared had been part of their scheme. They'd turned me into an unwitting accomplice and then acted like I was the traitor for refusing to be a willing one. Around midnight, I made my first call. The number belonged to Jake Morrison, an investigative journalist I'd met at a professional conference 2 years earlier. We'd stayed in loose contact, exchanging industry articles and occasionally grabbing coffee when his work brought him to town. Jake specialized in construction industry corruption, and his exposés had led to several high-profile arrests in neighboring states. "Sarah, it's kind of late for a social call," Jake said, though he didn't sound annoyed. I could hear the faint clicking of keyboard keys in the background. "I need to talk to you about something important. Something that could be a big story." My voice was steadier than I'd expected. "But I need guarantees about protecting sources and timing the release strategically." Jake's tone sharpened with interest. "I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? I have documentation of systematic fraud and safety violations in the local construction industry. People have been hurt, Jake. Families have been destroyed while the perpetrators got rich and covered their tracks." "Holy shit, Sarah. Are you talking about your dad's company?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was my moment to back down. To remember blood loyalty and family bonds, and all the reasons I should protect the people who'd raised me. Instead, I thought about Marcus Rodriguez Kane and his daughter's college fund and Emma's smug smile. "Yes," I said simply. "I am." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town, somewhere none of my family would accidentally encounter us. After hanging up, I made 2 more calls. The first was to Sarah Chen, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in whistleblower protection. The second was to the state's fraud hotline, though I didn't provide any details yet, just established that I intended to file a formal complaint and needed information about the process. By 3 a.m., I had a comprehensive plan. Jake would investigate and prepare his exposé while I gathered additional evidence and protected myself legally. Sarah would advise me on both the criminal and civil aspects of the case, helping me understand what protections existed for family members who reported fraud. The state investigation would proceed parallel to the media attention, ensuring that even if my family tried to destroy evidence or flee, there would be multiple agencies pursuing them. But the most important part of my plan had nothing to do with authorities or journalists. It was personal. I wanted Emma to understand the full consequences of her choices. She'd helped destroy workers' lives for extra spending money, then used that blood money to buy designer clothes and expensive cars. She'd stood behind our parents as they exiled me, smiling like she'd won some kind of prize. She thought being the good daughter would protect her from consequences. She was about to learn otherwise. I spent the remaining hours before dawn creating detailed timelines, cross-referencing financial records with injury reports, and building an ironclad case that would leave no room for my family to claim ignorance or minimize their actions. Every fraudulent invoice, every bribed inspector, every corner cut that led to worker injuries, all of it documented with dates, amounts, and supporting evidence. As the sun rose over the city, painting my apartment in soft golden light that reminded me painfully of Thanksgiving mornings past, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Peace. Not happiness. That would take time to rebuild, but the clear, cold satisfaction of knowing I was finally doing the right thing. My family had chosen money over morality, corruption over conscience, and silence over justice. Now they would learn that some betrayals have consequences that extend far beyond a single Thanksgiving dinner. The war they'd started by banishing me was about to begin in earnest. The coffee shop Jake had suggested was perfect for clandestine meetings, tucked into a strip mall on the opposite side of town, frequented by college students and remote workers who minded their own business. I arrived early, claiming a corner booth with clear sightlines to both entrances, my laptop bag heavy with printed documents and backup drives containing 5 years of financial records. Jake arrived exactly on time, looking every inch the investigative reporter with his rumpled blazer and permanently skeptical expression. Head aged well since our last meeting, though I noticed new lines around his eyes that spoke of long nights chasing stories and difficult truths. "Sarah," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I have to admit, I never expected this call from you. I never expected to make it." I pushed a manila folder across the table. "But some lines can't be uncrossed once you've seen them." Jake opened the folder and went very still as he absorbed the first few pages. Financial records showing systematic overbilling, safety inspection reports that had been falsified, employee injury claims that told a story of negligence and cover-ups. His reporter's instincts kicked in immediately. I watched his eyes sharpen as he recognized the scope of what I was offering. "Jesus Christ, Sarah, this is massive." He looked up at me with something between admiration and concern. "You know what this means for your family. My family made their choice when they prioritized profit over people's lives. They made it again when they chose to exile me, rather than face the consequences of their actions." I kept my voice steady. "Professional. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light." We spent 3 hours going through everything I'd collected. Jake asked tough questions, probed for holes in my documentation, and helped me understand how the story would unfold from a media perspective. He also gave me crucial advice about protecting myself legally and personally. "Your family will come after you hard once this breaks," he warned. "They'll claim you're a disgruntled employee, that you falsified records, that this is revenge for some personal grievance. You need to be bulletproof before we go public." That afternoon, I met with Sarah Chen at her downtown law office. Sarah had built a reputation as one of the state's most effective whistleblower advocates, representing employees who'd exposed everything from healthcare fraud to environmental violations. Her office walls were covered with newspaper clippings, documenting successful cases and grateful letters from clients whose courage had prevented further harm. The good news is that construction industry fraud falls under several different whistleblower protection statutes, Sarah explained after reviewing my evidence. The bad news is that family whistleblowing cases are always emotionally brutal, and your relatives will likely try to destroy you personally before this is over. She helped me file preliminary complaints with 3 different agencies: the State Attorney General's Office, the Occupational Safety Administration, and the Federal Fraud Task Force. Each complaint established a paper trail, proving ID reported the violations in good faith, which would protect me from retaliation claims later. "Now comes the hard part," Sarah said, "gathering additional evidence while maintaining your normal routine. If your family suspects you're building a case, they might start destroying documents or intimidating other potential witnesses. That's where my plan got creative. I still had access to Dad's company offices and computer systems, since technically I remained his accountant despite our personal estrangement. Over the following weeks, I arrived early and stayed late, copying files and documenting evidence that painted an even darker picture than I'd initially realized. The pattern of corruption went deeper than safety violations and overbilling. Dad's company had been falsifying minority contractor certifications to win government contracts set aside for disadvantaged businesses. They'd created fake companies owned by Emma and several of Dad's friends, then subcontracted the work back to themselves while keeping the preferential bid advantages. Even worse, I discovered they'd been systematically cheating their own employees. Overtime pay had been miscalculated for years. Health insurance premiums had been deducted but not always forwarded to the insurance company, and several workers' compensation claims had been illegally denied or delayed. But the breakthrough came when I found Marcus Rodriguez's complete file. The accident report claimed he'd fallen due to his own negligence, failing to properly secure his safety harness. The reality, documented in internal emails I found on Dad's computer, was that the scaffolding system had a known defect that Dad chose to ignore rather than pay for repairs. 3 different workers had reported stability issues in the weeks before Marcus' fall, and Dad had ordered them to keep working anyway. The emails were damning. Rodriguez is complaining about the scaffolding again. Emma had written to Dad, "Should I schedule the repair crew?" Dad's response was brutal in its casual cruelty. "Too expensive this close to project completion. Tell him to be more careful or find another job." 2 days later, Marcus had fallen 20 feet and shattered his back. I made copies of everything, storing originals in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. But I also began reaching out to other victims, using public records and social media to locate workers who'd been injured on Dad's projects. The conversations were heartbreaking. Maria Santos had lost 2 fingers in a saw accident when Dad's crew failed to install proper safety guards. Her disability payments barely covered her mortgage, and she'd been forced to sell her car to afford medical care. David Park had been burned by defective electrical equipment that Dad knew was faulty but continued using anyway. He still couldn't work with his hands and had lost his house to foreclosure. Each story added another layer to my understanding of the human cost of my family's greed. These weren't abstract victims. They were parents and spouses and breadwinners whose lives had been permanently altered by preventable accidents. But it was Tom Williams who became my most powerful ally. Tom had worked for Dad's company for 8 years before being injured in a trench collapse that should never have happened. The safety protocols for deep excavation were clear and legally mandated, but Dad's crew had skipped essential steps to save time and money. Tom's injury had cost him his career in construction and left him with chronic pain that no amount of physical therapy could fully address. But unlike the other victims, Tom had been keeping his own records, photographing unsafe conditions, documenting safety violations, and maintaining a detailed diary of incidents that Dad's company covered up or minimized. "I always suspected your father was crooked," Tom told me during our second meeting, "but I could never prove it alone, and nobody wanted to listen to some injured worker complaining about his former boss." Together, we had everything we needed: Tom's first-hand testimony about safety violations, my financial records proving the fraud, and Jake's investigative platform to ensure the story reached the widest possible audience. Sarah had prepared all the legal protections it'd need, and the state agencies were already beginning their preliminary investigations. The only missing piece was timing. I wanted maximum impact, and that meant coordinating the media release with the criminal investigations and civil actions. But more than that, I wanted my family to understand the full scope of what they'd lost when they chose corruption over conscience. Christmas was approaching, and I knew they'd expect me to come crawling back, ready to apologize and beg for forgiveness. Instead, they were about to receive the gift of consequences, wrapped in legal documents and delivered by federal agents. The little girl who'd once helped Dad pour concrete and believed in his stories about building things that mattered was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who understood that sometimes the most important construction project is building justice from the rubble of broken trust. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that made everything look deceptively peaceful. It'd been awake since 5 a.m., not from excitement like childhood Christmases, but from the electric anticipation of justice finally arriving. Today wasn't about presents under a tree. It was about delivering consequences that had been months in the making. Jake's exposé was scheduled to publish online at 9 a.m., timed perfectly with the morning news cycle. The headline read, "Local Construction Empire, Built on Worker Blood and Taxpayer Fraud," and the accompanying investigation was devastating. 23 pages of documented corruption, complete with financial records, injury reports, and testimonies from 7 different victims. At 8:30, my phone started buzzing. Sarah was coordinating with federal agents who would be serving search warrants simultaneously across 3 locations: Dad's office, the family home, and Emma's apartment. Tom Williams was standing by to provide additional testimony if needed, and the state attorney general's office had assembled a task force specifically for this case. "You ready for this?" Jake asked when he called to confirm final details. "Once this goes live, there's no going back." There was no going back the moment they chose money over family, I replied. I'm ready. The article went live at exactly 9 a.m. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications as the story began spreading across social media and news aggregators. The local television stations picked it up immediately, and I could see the view count climbing rapidly as people shared the link with increasingly shocked comments. At 9:15, the first search warrant was executed at Dad's office. I wasn't there to witness it, but Jake had a contact inside the federal building who provided real-time updates. Agents seized computers, filed boxes of documents, and escorted Dad away in handcuffs while his remaining employees watched in stunned silence. The second warrant hit the family home 20 minutes later. I found myself imagining Mom's face as federal agents knocked on the door Shed slammed in mine just weeks earlier. The same entrance where Shed declared me unwelcome was now breached by law enforcement officers, carrying evidence boxes and wearing badges that represented the justice my family had tried to buy their way around. Emma's arrest came last, at her downtown apartment that Shed furnished with blood money. The irony wasn't lost on me that her expensive furniture and designer clothes would likely be seized as assets purchased with fraudulent funds. The little sister who'd sold out her own family for material comfort was about to lose everything Shed gained. By noon, the story had gone national. Jake's investigation was being quoted by major news outlets, and the comments sections were filled with outraged citizens demanding accountability. The construction industry trade publications picked up the story, and I started receiving calls from reporters in other states asking if similar corruption existed in their regions. But the call that mattered most came at 2 p.m. It was from Marcus Rodriguez. "Seraphina," he said, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. "I just read the article. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe someone finally did this. You deserved better, Marcus. All of you did." "My wife is crying," he continued. "Not sad tears, happy tears. She keeps saying that somebody finally cared enough to tell the truth. We thought nobody would ever listen." That conversation broke something loose in my chest that had been holding tight for months. This wasn't just about family betrayal anymore. It was about Marcus' 3 kids who might now have a chance at justice. It was about Maria Santos getting compensation for her lost fingers. It was about David Park finally having someone acknowledge that his injuries weren't his fault. The legal ramifications came swiftly. The state attorney general announced criminal charges against all 3 family members within 48 hours. Dad faced 17 counts including fraud, bribery, and criminal negligence. Emma was charged with conspiracy and money laundering. Mom faced charges related to using her real estate license to facilitate the shell companies they'd created. But the civil lawsuits were where the real justice emerged. Marcus, Maria, David, Tom, and 4 other injured workers filed a massive class action suit, seeking damages not just for their injuries, but for the ongoing medical costs, lost wages, and pain they'd endured while my family lived luxuriously off their suffering. The financial penalties were staggering. The company's assets were frozen, their construction licenses revoked, and their insurance policies canceled. The government contracts they'd won through fraudulent minority certification were voided, with financial penalties that exceeded their total net worth. Jake's follow-up articles revealed even more corruption as other victims came forward and additional evidence surfaced. The story had opened floodgates, with workers from across the region sharing similar experiences of corner-cutting, safety violations, and cover-ups in the construction industry. 3 days after Christmas, I received an unexpected visitor. Uncle Jim stood at my apartment door, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Had always been my favorite relative, the one who taught me card games and brought me books from his travels. "Sarah," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I let him in, though every instinct warned me this was some kind of family-sent peace mission designed to make me drop the charges or recant my testimony. "I need you to know," he began, settling heavily into my living room chair, "that not everyone in the family knew about this. When I saw the news, when I read what Robert and Patricia had been doing," he shook his head. "I'm ashamed to share their name." "Did you come here to ask me to stop cooperating with the investigation?" "Hell no," he said firmly. "I came here to tell you that you did the right thing. What they did to you at Thanksgiving. What they've been doing to those workers. It's unforgivable. I raised my brother better than that. And am sorry he forgot the values our parents taught us. Uncle Jim became my first family ally in months. He testified willingly about conversations where Dad had bragged about working the system and knowing which inspectors could be bought. His testimony was crucial because it established that the corruption was intentional and systematic, not just careless bookkeeping. As January arrived, the full scope of the consequences became clear. Dad's construction empire was finished, their personal assets seized, and their reputation destroyed beyond any possibility of recovery. The family that had chosen money over morality was about to lose everything they'd gained through their criminal schemes. But more importantly, justice was finally being served to the people who'd been ignored and dismissed for years. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a gray February morning that felt fitting for the occasion. I sat in the courthouse gallery, watching my parents and sister enter in shackles and orange jumpsuits, a far cry from the designer clothes Emma had been wearing when she helped exile me from Thanksgiving dinner. Dad looked like he'd aged a decade in the 2 months since his arrest. His usually perfect posture had collapsed into a defeated slouch, and his hands shook as he signed documents. Mom maintained her rigid composure, but I could see the cracks in her facade when she thought nobody was watching. Emma kept glancing around the courtroom like she expected someone to rescue her, still seemingly unable to grasp that her actions had real consequences. The prosecutor's opening statement was methodical and devastating. Financial fraud totaling over $800,000, safety violations that had injured 11 workers over 5 years, bribery schemes involving 6 different city inspectors, tax evasion through shell companies. The list of charges felt endless, each one representing another choice my family had made to prioritize profit over people. But it was the victim impact statements that truly revealed the human cost of their crimes. Marcus Rodriguez struggled to walk to the podium, his cane clicking against the marble floor with each painful step. His voice was steady as he described watching his daughter give up her college dreams to help pay for his medical treatments. The defendant's daughter, he said, looking directly at me in the gallery, showed more courage and integrity in one day than this entire family showed in 5 years. She gave up everything to make sure the truth came out, and I'll be grateful to her for the rest of my life. Maria Santos spoke about learning to write left-handed after losing 2 fingers, and how she'd been too embarrassed to tell her children that their family's financial struggles were caused by her former employer's negligence. David Park's wife testified about watching her husband sink into depression after his injuries ended his career, and how they'd nearly lost their home while Dad's family lived in luxury. Tom Williams was the most powerful witness. His 8 years of documented safety violations, photographs of dangerous conditions, and detailed diary of incidents painted a picture of systematic disregard for worker welfare. When he described finding Marcus Rodriguez unconscious and bleeding after the scaffolding collapse, Emma actually started crying, though whether from genuine remorse or self-pity was unclear. The defense attorneys tried various strategies. They claimed Dad was overwhelmed by business pressures and made poor decisions under stress. They suggested Emma was manipulated by older family members and didn't understand the legal implications of her actions. They painted Mom as a peripheral figure who trusted her husband's business judgment too much. But the evidence was overwhelming, and their excuses crumbled under cross-examination. Jake's investigation had been so thorough that every defense claim was contradicted by documented facts. The financial records showed premeditation and systematic planning. The safety violations were clearly intentional cost-cutting measures. The bribery schemes required detailed coordination over years. During a recess, I encountered Mom in the courthouse hallway. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of hatred and desperate pleading that made my stomach turn. "You destroyed your own family," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Was your revenge worth it? Was proving you were right worth sending your father to prison?" "This isn't revenge," I replied, pulling away from her grip. "This is justice for people you hurt while I was too blind to see it. The family was destroyed the moment you chose to profit from other people's pain. We could have worked things out privately," she continued. "We could have made changes, compensated people quietly. You didn't have to humiliate us publicly. You had months to make changes. Instead, you chose to exile me for having a conscience. I looked at her steadily. Every worker who got hurt after I tried to warn you is blood on your hands, not mine. The plea negotiations revealed the full extent of their financial crimes. The prosecution had traced money flows through dozens of accounts, uncovered tax evasion schemes dating back 7 years, and identified patterns of bid rigging on government contracts worth millions. The civil lawsuits were proceeding parallel to criminal charges, with injured workers' attorneys calculating damages that would bankrupt the family completely. Dad's attorney recommended accepting a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations and full restitution to victims. Emma's lawyer negotiated 8 years for her cooperation, though her computer expertise made her particularly valuable for tracing the digital aspects of their schemes. Mom faced 5 years for her role in the real estate fraud and money laundering. The day they formally accepted their plea agreements, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. A sense of completion, not happiness or satisfaction exactly, but the quiet peace that comes from seeing justice served and truth acknowledged. Jake's follow-up articles continued tracking the story's impact. The federal investigation had expanded to examine corruption throughout the regional construction industry, with 4 other companies now under investigation. New safety regulations were being proposed, and worker advocacy groups were using our case as an example of why whistleblower protections needed strengthening. The financial restitution was substantial. Between criminal fines, civil judgments, and asset seizures, Marcus Rodriguez received enough compensation to pay for continued medical treatment and restore his daughter's college fund. Maria Santos got a settlement that allowed her to retrain for work she could perform with her remaining fingers. David Park's family avoided foreclosure and got funds for his ongoing therapy. Tom Williams used his settlement to start a nonprofit organization focused on construction, safety, advocacy, and supporting injured workers. He asked me to serve on the board of directors, which felt like the perfect way to transform this painful experience into something constructive. But the most meaningful moment came when Marcus Rodriguez's daughter sent me a handwritten letter. She was starting college in the fall, majoring in civil engineering with plans to specialize in construction safety. "Because of your courage," she wrote, "I can pursue my dreams and help make sure what happened to my father never happens to other families." That letter is framed on my office wall now, a reminder that sometimes breaking your family apart is the only way to build something better from the pieces. 2 years after that devastating Thanksgiving, I found myself hosting my own holiday celebration in my new home across town. The dining room was filled with laughter and conversation as my chosen family gathered around a table set for 12. Marcus Rodriguez and his wife, Tom Williams and his girlfriend, Sarah Chen and her husband, Jake Morrison, Uncle Jim and his partner David, and 3 other friends who'd become my support system through the darkest period of my life. The transformation hadn't been easy. The months following my family's imprisonment had been filled with therapy sessions, sleepless nights, and the difficult work of rebuilding an identity that wasn't defined by family loyalty or professional obligation. I'd left accounting entirely, using my settlement from the whistleblower lawsuit to start a nonprofit organization dedicated to construction worker advocacy and safety education. "Sarah," Marcus said as we passed dishes around the table, "I have something to tell you." Rosa got accepted to MIT's civil engineering program with a full scholarship. The table erupted in cheers and applause. Rosa Rodriguez, the daughter whose college fund had been drained to pay for her father's medical treatments, was now heading to one of the country's most prestigious engineering schools. She'd written her application essay about construction safety, inspired by her father's experiences, and determined to prevent future accidents through better design and oversight. "She wants to specialize in structural safety," Marcus continued, his eyes bright with pride and unshed tears. "She says she's going to make sure no other families go through what we did." Tom raised his glass of wine. "To Sarah," he said, "for showing us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose what's right over what's easy." The toast was echoed around the table by voices that had become more precious to me than any blood relation ever could be. These people had chosen to stand with me when the cost was high and the outcome uncertain. They'd supported me through months of legal proceedings, media attention, and the inevitable backlash from community members who viewed family loyalty as sacred, regardless of the moral cost. Sarah leaned over to squeeze my hand. Any word from the appeals court on the final settlements? The last checks went out yesterday, I replied. Every injured worker has received full compensation, plus the fund for ongoing medical care is fully endowed. The new safety training program launches next month with enough funding to operate for at least 5 years. The program was my proudest achievement, a comprehensive initiative that would train construction workers to recognize and report safety violations without fear of retaliation. WED partnered with unions, advocacy groups, and even some ethical construction companies to create a support network that would prevent future tragedies. Jake had been documenting the program's development for a book about whistleblowing and its aftermath. I got a call from a publisher in New York. He mentioned as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. They want to turn this story into a documentary. But they want you to be involved, Sarah. Your perspective as someone who chose justice over family loyalty. The idea of reliving those painful months on camera made my stomach clench, but I understood the potential impact. If my story could inspire other people to speak up about corruption, if it could show that sometimes breaking your family is the only way to build something better, then maybe the pain would serve a purpose beyond my own healing. What would be the focus? I asked. Redemption through moral courage, Jake replied. The idea that sometimes love means holding people accountable for their actions, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. Uncle Jim, who'd become my strongest family ally and closest confidant, nodded thoughtfully. Your parents get out of prison in about 10 years, he said quietly. Have you thought about what happens then? It was a question I'd been avoiding, but one that deserved consideration. Dad would be 73 when he was released. Mom would be 70, and Emma would be 37. Still young enough to rebuild her life if she chose to learn from her mistakes rather than resent the consequences of her choices. I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm not the same person who used to prioritize family above everything else. If they want a relationship with me when they get out, they'll need to prove they've genuinely changed, not just serve their time and expect forgiveness. The conversation moved to lighter topics: upcoming weddings, vacation plans, career developments among our growing circle of friends. But later that evening, as I cleaned up dishes and reflected on how different this Thanksgiving was from the last one I'd spent with my biological family, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart rate spiked, wondering if somehow my imprisoned family members had found a way to contact me. But the message was from a young woman named Jennifer Collins. No relation, just someone who'd read about my story online. Miss Collins, the message read, I work for a construction company where I think similar things are happening. I found safety violations and financial irregularities, but I'm scared to report them because the owner is my boyfriend's father. I don't know what to do. Could you help me? I stared at the message for a long time, remembering my own fear and confusion 2 years earlier. The girl facing the same impossible choice between loyalty and conscience that had nearly destroyed me. But now I had something I hadn't possessed then: a support network, legal expertise, and the hard-won knowledge that choosing justice over family comfort was possible and worthwhile. I typed back, call me tomorrow. You don't have to face this alone. As I turned off the lights in my dining room, I realized that this was how healing worked. Not by forgetting the pain or pretending the betrayal hadn't happened, but by transforming the experience into something that could help others facing similar impossible choices. My biological family had taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty or moral character. But my chosen family had shown me that real love means supporting each other's growth, celebrating courage over comfort, and building something beautiful from the rubble of broken trust. The little girl who once helped pour concrete with her father was gone, but the woman who'd emerged from that betrayal was stronger, more compassionate, and infinitely more capable of building relationships based on integrity rather than obligation. And that felt like the best possible foundation for whatever came next. Hey everyone. This story really makes you think about family loyalty versus doing what's right, doesn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a situation where speaking up meant losing people you cared about? Was it worth it in the end? Drop your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories. Share this with someone who might need to hear that choosing justice over family comfort is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation and growth. Remember, sometimes the family we choose teaches us more about love than the family we're born into. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort. And never be afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything.